Today on the We Invested podcast, we have Dan Haberkost, and he is the founder and CEO of Front Range Land. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Wes. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about this episode. We were talking a little bit about it before we started recording, so I can't wait to learn more.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Absolutely. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's just start from the top. So, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a cornfield in Ohio, in rural Ohio, about an hour southwest of Cleveland. So, for anyone who's been to the Midwest, very rural, not a whole lot's changed since the Great Depression, I think.
That's dope. You a LeBron fan?
I don't really follow basketball. When I was a kid, I did because I played, but then middle school hit and I didn't grow and everyone else did, so I wasn't good at basketball anymore. So I stopped following that after middle school. Yeah.
All right, no problem. No, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. So, what is Front Range Land?
So Front Range Land is my active business, and what that is very simply is land and development. So it's a mixture of buying and selling land for cash, buying and selling land on notes, and then the best parcels, the infill ones with flat terrain, all the utilities in place, very shovel ready, are the ones I'll actually put a house on. And that is the active business that feeds the passive investing, which is really the goal to grow the passive investment portfolio.
Okay, that's awesome, man. And that's kind of something that we talked about a little bit before we started recording is that, your business has a passive and active side.
Mhm.
So what was the vision and the idea behind, having those businesses with two different um, routes, I guess you could call it.
Sure, sure. So, rewind back to college. When I first got into real estate investing, really what happened is I was working full time. I was going to school full time, and that was challenging. And I thought, okay, well, I haven't had a whole lot of fun in college like most of my peers have, but how do I take this skill set I've developed and apply it as soon as I graduate here to build some sort of business on the side, so that I can at least progress quicker? Because I'd been managing other people's businesses since I was 16. So I definitely was a little bit precocious in my experience by the time I was graduating college. So, like just about everyone else, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And at the same time, I was reading about all different types of businesses investing. But that was what really stuck out to me, which, of course, he talks about real estate. So I found Bigger Pockets shortly thereafter, started listening to all the podcasts, and that was that. I bought my first duplex before graduating college. And you hear about all these low and no money down strategies. And that's great to get maybe a house hack or two. But if you really want to build a portfolio of rental properties, it's a lot easier if you have a substantial income, whether it's through being a high W-2 earner or starting some kind of business. So it took me a little while to figure that out. I bought my duplex early 2018 and kind of floundered around for a while. I moved to Colorado in the process, so that took up some time. But it hit me pretty clearly that, hey, this is a cash intensive business. You need money to get deals, you need money to market for deals, and then you need money to maintain deals because things are going to come up. And I learned that the hard way too. So I slowly but surely found land and development, and really that came down to what's the market I'm in, what's the overarching macro environment, right? There's a shortage of housing, so building makes a lot of sense. And even if I'm not building, there's a lot of people looking for land to build on. And more than anything, just the people I met through networking at local real estate groups were in that space. And I'm not one to reinvent the wheel. I'm not super creative, so I like to find strategies that work, find people who are excelling with those strategies and learn from them. So, short summary, I made a friend at the local real estate club who he was about my dad's age and didn't really need money, but he wanted some help in his business on the technical side of things. So I helped him out there. He started to teach me a little bit about land and development, and that's where it started. And that was right when I moved here in the summer of 2018. And then as of today, now I'm just buying and selling land and building houses, and that's what Front Range Land is.
Nice, that's awesome. So is real estate something that you've always been interested in, or is it something that kind of developed over time?
Well, so that's actually a good question because no. So my first experience with real estate was when I was 16 years old. I was managing a portfolio of rentals for my boss at the time and his farm while he would travel the world. And so this taught me how not to do real estate because he did not maintain his rentals very well. They were already in C minus neighborhoods, and he had a very confrontational dynamic with his tenants, and so that's a recipe for disaster. I remember when I was 16, I was this was fall of my junior year of high school. I was ripping up just a trash carpet covered in animal feces, and the house was just disgusting. It was a hot and humid Ohio day. A year later, I'm now 17, a senior in high school, ripping up carpet in that same house. Another tenant had trashed it. And so that experience, to answer your question, no, I didn't realize what real estate could do until I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and then got into the world of bigger pockets and met some people in that space. My first experience with real estate made me want nothing to do with it, honestly. So, yeah, that was not initially a good experience.
For sure, for sure. So, it's really interesting, and I think it's pretty cool that you mentioned, bigger pockets. That was how I got introduced to real estate too in maybe 2017.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but something that they talk about and something that you just mentioned that I'm, interested in and working on doing myself is house hacking. So,
Mm.
is that a topic that you can kind of elaborate on and kind of just break down what it means?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because for someone who's looking to get started, it's like training wheels for investing. So, house hacking, for anyone who doesn't know, is if you buy a single family or a duplex, triplex, quadplex, occupy one unit or room, you get conventional financing, which means the lower down payment. So, 3.5% if you're going FHA, 5% if you're going conventional. You occupy the property and rent out the extra space, whether that's the rooms or the units, with the goal of at least eliminating the expense of living, if not actually cash flowing. And I can tell you here in Colorado, you can cash flow doing that. I just picked up my newest rental by doing another house hack, renting the bedroom I was in, and bedrooms rent for so much money. It's kind of crazy. The master I was in, I rented for $800 a month. I just rented my basement to a dentist for with an 800 credit score for $1,200 a month. So there are advantages to the lack of housing in that you can get exceptional tenants. I mean, 750, 800 is the credit score that I consistently get for room by room rentals, and these people will stay a year, 2 years. So back to your initial question, house hacking is renting out the extra space in the property you occupy. So it could even be you own a single family house and there's an ADU or an extra, or I think it's accessory dwelling unit on the property that you rent out. But really what it is it's allowing you to use the financing for owner occupied homes, but at the same time get your first investment because you're renting out the extra space. And another advantage to that is even if the property doesn't cash flow, let's say you're in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and you can't cash flow the property, well, I'm sure you can still substantially reduce that cost of living. And for most people, their housing is their most substantial expense. So if you can either reduce or eliminate that, that's going to really drastically increase how much you can put into investments or savings or whatever every month. So it's an awesome way to start. Plus, the reason I say it's like training wheels for investing, you're occupying the property. So if your tenants know the landlord's right next door or in the same house, it's a little bit harder for them to get away with trashing the place or leaving junk in the yard or that sort of thing because you're right there. So it's a really great way to get started, and it's really difficult to go wrong doing it because you got to live somewhere. So there are few circumstances where it's not feasible, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that 1000%, man. Because like you said, that's for a normal person, that's their biggest expense is their mortgage or
Mm-hmm.
their rent or whatever they're paying. So if you can figure out a way to knock that down or knock it in half or whatever you can do with it, it'll be a huge benefit, to your finances, personal life, whatever.
Yep. Yep.
So, let's kind of take it back. When did you buy your first rental?
So that was beginning of 2018. It was just before I graduated. So while I was in college, I was working at a landscaping company, and I was simultaneously going to school full time. And at the landscaping company, long story short, I got thrown into managing the whole residential side. So I won't go too much off on a tangent here, but I was managing the guys. I was responsible for selling the work, gross margins. I mean, everything except the physical accounting, I was pretty much doing for the residential side of the business. So, I mean, that really uh, was trial by fire because I didn't know that much about landscaping either. But I would say that aside from maybe the last year, that last year or two where I was doing that, I learned more than I ever have in a short period of time because I just had to take on so much so young. I'm 20 years old managing guys who are twice my age. So, anyways, as I graduated, right before I graduated, I bought the duplex, and it was a house hack. So started with a house hack, just like most people. And that, again, I made a lot of mistakes. I tend to be more the personality type. I don't get analysis paralysis, but I can jump into things way too quickly. So actually, on top of reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and everything else, I almost forgot the story. I'm glad I thought of this. I was at lunch, and my coworker Ryan, he was, I don't know, 10 years older than me. Him and his wife had just finished rehabbing their house, and he goes, "Yeah, I got the tenants upstairs, so they're paying my mortgage now." I'm like, "What?" It's like, yeah, I know. I got a duplex and renovated it, and they're upstairs, and they're paying my mortgage, and I'm downstairs. Like, that's incredible. And that was right at the same time that I was just reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and just discovered Bigger Pockets. So it kind of all happened at once. And so it was 2 or 3 months after that that I bought a duplex. And same thing. I occupied the upstairs, had tenants downstairs. Now, young, naive, didn't have a whole lot of experience. In hindsight, I probably overpaid for that. The realtor just wanted to make her commission. She wasn't super helpful. And then the tenant that was still in the property left a lot of damage and a lot of work for me that I probably could have avoided to some degree. So a lot of lessons learned there. But I still own that property today, and that's in Ohio because I was still in Ohio at the time, and it cash flows. I've got a property manager handling it, so it's appreciated a little bit, amortized, and it lowers my taxes. So a good learning experience. First deal doesn't make you rich, but it gets you started.
For sure. No, that's awesome. And I think that's a great way to think about it and a great way to kind of explain it to people. Like your first investment, your first home or whatever may not make you rich, but it's a good foundation and a good starting point.
Yeah, and the other thing too is just the mindset that you develop. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but just in my experience in the last year, even because it's been a very exponential year, and I think about the things that I spent time thinking about as far as expenses and that sort of thing just a year ago, and the things that I thought were and weren't feasible. And it's crazy once you get into it, once you get started, what you realize you can accomplish in a short period of time. You're worried about things that are worth $20 or $30 an hour, and then suddenly you realize you can make hundreds or $1,000 an hour, and then why did I waste any time worrying about that? So again, we can get into that a little more later, but the mindset that you develop when you get started is really important. I've run into so many people at the real estate club here. I host it with a couple other guys here in the Springs now, Colorado Springs, and it's difficult talking to people or seeing people that I've known for years saying they're going to get started and they never do anything. They think it's saving up a certain amount of money or reading a certain amount of books, and unfortunately, there's a point where you just got to go out and do something. Pick a strategy that fits your goal. Figure out what you're trying to accomplish. Pick a strategy that fits. Work backwards, right? And then go do it, because this isn't new. Whether it's house hacking or buying and selling land or wholesaling, there's a million people that have done it. So you can go figure out what the things you need to do are in order to be successful and then execute them. Getting started is really important.
For sure. And that's definitely some great advice. Um, but can you tell us a little bit about your more interesting deals or your more interesting purchases? I know before we started recording you were telling me about a cool situation that you had, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah. This is a kind of a funny story. And there's a lot I can pull out of this. So first key point, I got this deal from a wholesaler at the real estate club I was just talking to you about. And she showed up. I'd never seen her before. She goes, "Oh, I'm a new wholesaler." And let's be real, it's a no and low money down way of getting started. So a lot of people who say they're going to be wholesalers disappear and they never do anything because it's hard, right? You're going to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. You got to have thick skin to unless you have someone doing the cold calling and mailing for you. So anyways, I thought she's probably not going to do anything, but there's no harm in giving her my number, right? Worst case, scenario, she calls me too much, but gave her my number. The next day, she sends me a property, and it's in an awesome part of town, right up against a park, very accessible, great views, good school district. And she sent me all the pictures in her drive. And because she didn't have her systems and process down, she was brand new. She also sent me her cash buyers list. And there were 4 people on it, myself included. 4. So, anyways, jumped on the deal. So I wanted to pull that lesson out of there. The power of networking. If I was sitting at home watching TV, I would have never gotten this deal, right? I was out at the real estate club. I'm very much a morning person. I don't like staying out till 9 on a weeknight, but I do, and that's one reason why. So, anyways, got the deal through a wholesaler. Now I go to look at the house, and it smells terrible. I mean, you walk inside, it's just uncomfortable. And there's the dad, his son, who just got out of prison, we're quickly informed, and the son's girlfriend. I put that in quotes, girlfriend. We'll get to that in a second. Uh, the dad is clearly just kind of low self-esteem, meek. The son takes advantage of him. Clearly, he needs to be kicked out, but he doesn't. The dad doesn't have the the heart to do it. So the house is trash cosmetically. It's disgusting. It smells terrible. But again, it's got a lot going for it as far as location. And from everything I can see, good bones, right? None of the major pieces or parts are damaged. So, anyways, I actually got a chance to get my inspector in there, which is not typical for a wholesale deal, but got my inspector in there. Again, he confirms what I said. It's just cosmetic stuff. Got the property under contract, closed on it. Great. Now it's time to rehab it. Well, it had to be very tactful in getting the family out. Thankfully, the dad was a reasonable person, unlike the other two occupants. I watched them get in a fight, actually, a physical altercation, the one day I was there. But, anyways, it turned out that the son's girlfriend was actually a prostitute that he was
Ah,
paying. And I found this out later. Yeah, found this out later when the dad came back. He had forgotten something. They were cleared out, and yeah, it turned out she was a prostitute. And then a few days after that, I'm rehabbing the place, and there's just a massive pounding on the door, and I hear someone yell, "Police, open up!" Turned out, I don't know what he did, but he was already wanted. There was already a warrant out for his arrest again, even though he'd just gotten out of prison. And so the police showed up looking for him, but he was gone. So, anyways, that was a house I got through a wholesaler with a wanted felon and a prostitute and the helpless dad in it. But today, it's occupied by a great young couple, no issues, awesome neighborhood. I'm sure it's got appreciated a good amount since then, and it cash flows every month, so it's just passive income at this point.
man, that's a crazy story. It's like you never know what type of people you can come across in the real estate.
No. Yep. Yep. So, anyways, yeah, the grossest houses tend to lead to the best returns. There's a house I'm working on trying to get in contact with the owner right now. It's the same sort of thing. It's just trashed, but it's in an awesome location where all the houses are worth $400,000 or $500,000 in one of the other markets I'm in. So, yeah, because at the end of the day, whether it's real estate or any business, it's just solving problems. That's all you're doing is solving problems. So those nasty problems you don't want to, or no one else wants to deal with, that's how you make money. I just bought a lot the other day. Uh, there were liens on it because the guy wouldn't cut the grass. There was some back taxes. I think that was the only two issues, but I went and solved those problems for the guy, bought it at 30 cents on the dollar, right? So it's just
Wow.
finding problems that other people don't want to deal with and solving them yourself, or one of your employees, right? So, yeah.
Man, that's super awesome. And you found a great deal, like you said, just by doing what the other guys wouldn't do or don't want to do.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
For sure. So, and let me just ask you a quick question as a side note or a tangent or whatever. But what are your thoughts on hiring property managers? I guess it's a two-part question. And what are your thoughts on investing in real estate that's outside of the state that you live in?
Okay, that's a good question, and there's no right or wrong answer. You can make it work, and I think it really depends what your strategy is. Number one, and where you live. So let me give an example. I'm going to hit on buying out of state first, and then I'll kind of hit on the property management thing. So as far as buying out of state, if I lived in Southern California, I'd probably be buying there. And my point in saying that is, for me, I don't really need the passive income. I don't have a situation I'm trying to escape. My active businesses make me far more money than I need to live. So for me, those nice, expensive, quality assets that I can buy, put great tenants in, and let the loan amortize and appreciate over the long term, that is more interesting to me than trying to create a whole bunch of cash flow right now. Whereas, let's say you're in a job you hate, or there's some reason you need to create cash flow quickly. Well, then it might make sense to go to closer to where I grew up in Ohio, where it's cheaper. Or, I know a lot of people go to Tennessee or places like that. So it depends what your goals are, because there's certain markets that are a little more on the side of cash flow, and there isn't quite as much as far as appreciation and amortization. And then there's markets where you can buy $1 million house and maybe you don't make any money monthly as far as cash flow, but that's $1 million asset someone else is paying for you, right? So to answer the first question, it depends on your situation, like with most things. So certain areas better for cash flow, certain areas are better for the wealth building, really. And then as far as property management, if you have family or someone you trust local and it's in a different market, I think you can make it work. But if you don't have that and you yourself aren't local, I think you should have a property manager, because you need some sort of support system or network. So when something goes wrong that's major, or it's winter and the heater furnace goes out, someone's got to be able to address that quickly. Um, and the other consideration there is just your time. So let's say all your rentals are local, but maybe I have a buddy who's an ER doctor, for example. He works 60, 70 hours a week. He makes like 600, 700 grand a year. He should not manage his own properties, you know? Whereas maybe you're a little on the lower end of the income, you have more time, but you don't have a ton of money. Well, you can trade that time you have to learn the management side and then also to save yourself some money. So, as with everything, it depends on your situation, and it's just knowing where you're at, what you're trying to accomplish, and then picking the strategy that works best for your goals.
For sure. No, that's awesome advice, man. So, um, how did you get started in new development?
Yeah. Okay. That's another good story. So this was within the first week of moving to Colorado. I go to the real estate club that I now host. Didn't know really anyone here. And a guy stands up at the end of the talk and he goes, "Hey, I've been doing this for 40 years. You know, I've owned every sort of investment you could imagine, built houses, I built an apartment in China, done a little bit of everything. But I need help on the technology side of my business. I don't really know social media or that sort of thing super well, but I'll teach someone in exchange for help there." And he lived about an hour south of where I am in Colorado Springs. And of course, everyone in the room gathered around him. He gave his number to everyone. Two people called him, myself and one other. And he and the other guy gave up after like a week. I went down there every weekend for like a year and learned from him. And in hindsight, I he'd done so many things and he was trying to share all that he'd learned with me all at once. And when you're new, you kind of got to pick one, maybe two things and stick with it. So like I said earlier, I floundered around for a bit because he's showing me notes he bought and foreclosures and et cetera. But he was building quite a bit in Vegas, California, and here in Colorado. So he was the first one that introduced me to that and really had taught me the new development side of things more than anyone.
No, that's awesome, man. And I think that's a great segue to my next question. Um, you know, what are some of the benefits of having a mentor?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. It's shortening the learning curve, really. Finding someone who knows what you want to know and providing them value somehow, and then they share what they know. But I think what's important, this gets, what's the word? Transactional. It's too transactional in a lot of people's mind. If you want to actually go pay a mentor, I've heard good things about some courses. I mean, that might work. But if you want free mentorship, it's really a matter of building genuine relationships with people. You know, this guy has really just become a friend at this point. And most of the people that I've learned from, and now even vice versa, there's some people that I'm helping that are newer. It's really about building genuine friendships over a long period of time. If you want to just show up and have someone teach you everything, then get your checkbook out because that's not going to be free. If you want mentorship for free, then find a way you can help the person. You know, don't make it so transactional where you're just trying to take, right? You got to give a little bit or a lot. When someone, ideally, if you're trying to learn from them, they're probably financially set. They know what you want to know. Why would they take the time to help you? And another thing I can say to that too is if that person does give you some time, make sure you do what they say. Come back with, "Hey, this is what worked. Oh, here's where I had challenges, or here's what didn't work. What am I doing wrong?" Because I can tell you, if someone comes and asks me for help and I spend time with them and then they do nothing with that, I don't want to help them again. On the flip side of that, I had a kid at the real estate club say he'd cold call all my return mail for me, and he went and did it all in like a week or a few days. I'm definitely going to help him where he needs it. He needs a little help with his sales ability, but he went and did the difficult thing and approached me. And so absolutely, I'll help him anytime. On the flip side, I don't know if you've heard the Real Deals podcast. That's one of my favorites. I got interviewed on that a couple of weeks ago, and the guy was giving me some advice. And what do you know? I went out and I applied that within a week, and I texted him, "Hey man, thanks a lot. This is what happened." So if someone's gonna help you for free, make sure you listen, make sure it's not transactional, and provide them value in some way if you can.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So a cool thing that I think you mentioned earlier is that you started out by going to the real estate clubs, but
Mm-hmm.
now you're hosting them and holding them yourself.
Yep.
Um, so um, what would you say is the importance of having a good team, and how did you build or find your team?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me think through. If I have a question that I don't know the answer to, and especially as I get busier and busier, I just think, okay, who can I ask who already knows, right? Whether it's a realtor or a property manager or lawyer, CPA, et cetera, because especially as you do find more and more success, your time becomes more valuable, right? And for example, I was talking to a friend of mine who has a YouTube channel, and he goes, "Oh, it's easy to edit the videos." I go, "No, no, 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 no. I'm not learning to do that. I don't have the patience for it. That's not my skill set. I'm going to go hire it out. I'm going to add that member to my team." So I'm working on that right now. And so if you're new, let's say you're a new investor and you want to go buy your first house hack, right? That's something we're talking about, and that's one of the most feasible first steps for a lot of new people. Well, in your case, I would go find a well, I hesitate to use the word mentor, but I would go to the local real estate clubs and I would ask around and find a realtor that knows the area really well, because that's invaluable, especially when you're new. You're not confident comping properties. You're not confident figuring out what they're going to rent for. So I would start by finding a realtor, right? Because they're going to be able to refer you to a good contractor, refer you to a good property manager. That's probably the most concrete first step for in the context of real estate, the first contact you want to make. But again, just like I was saying, don't waste that person's time. If they send you some listings, make sure you respond and say, "Oh, this is why I think this would work or this wouldn't work." For me, to use the example in my own life, I'm working on buying my first commercial building. And as anyone in the real estate world knows, there's a barrier to entry to the brokers in the commercial world, right? So one of them that was just sending me deals, I made sure to take the time to have a thorough, detailed response as to why I didn't like the property he sent me and why I wouldn't offer on it. I sent him a couple properties I had offered on recently here, right? So I'm getting a little bit on a tangent here. So to bring it back to your initial question, I think building a team is everything, especially when you're new, because you can't know everything. So you've got to rely on other people who have been there. And so to come back to the kind of more micro, a more practical level, if you're trying to get into real estate investing specifically, finding a good realtor is a great place to start. Or potentially, if you can find a investor who has a lot of experience and provide them value in some way, that would be another great resource. So yeah, having those people that you can just send questions or info to and get an answer like that is super helpful. And it's not just on the private side. At the treasurer's office, there's a girl who knows me, and I can get back tax information because I mean, I'm buying, selling a lot of land. Or at the water district, the girl who knows all about what properties do and don't have water and sewer, she knows me, and so that helps. And it takes time. You're not going to have all these contacts right away, but oh, and a title agent. A title agent's really important too. Same sort of thing. She has access to records and data that I don't. So, for example, I just got a land lead. I need to figure out how the title is held. The deed is too old for me to pull up on the public search, but she has a system that'll pull it up like that. So I send it to her, and I mean, they're closed now, but I'll have an answer first thing tomorrow morning. So building a team is really important if you want to systemize business.
For sure, for sure. So, what would you say is your favorite thing about being an entrepreneur?
Just the freedom, man. I remember school just being torture as a kid because I just hated sitting still and having, being told what to do or where to go. From day one, I've I've never been able to sit still, and just the freedom of being an entrepreneur is amazing in my opinion. And then just the absolute, and this is really a corollary to that, the scalability of the income. I remember another decision I had to make early on because I was working that landscaping job when I bought my first property, making a middle class income. That's not bad as a, a 20-year-old, 1 year old kid. But I looked around and I said, okay, if I want to buy properties this way, it's going to take a long time. If I want to make a substantial income, it's going to take a long time, even if I slowly and surely build up my income. And at the same time, you'd hear about some people on Bigger Pockets or different podcasts, met a couple people like this in person where they're making hundreds of thousands a month. I think I'd rather go do that. So that was a decision I made a couple years ago. No, I'm not quite to that point yet, but finding something that's scalable and pursuing it aggressively is key. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what would you say is the single most important reason for your success?
Being relentless in whatever you're doing. If you want to be successful in anything, being persistent. A lot of the land deals I've gotten, I hired a new acquisitions manager, so I was really trying to drill this in our head today. I have followed up 8, 10, 12 times. I mean, you have to be relentless in whatever you're doing. Same thing with the guy I was telling you about that's really a mentor and who's taught me the development business. It took a long time of learning from him before I had any sort of success. But I remember thinking, because there was times where I wanted to stop, going meeting with him and so on. And I thought, well, it's clear that he knows everything I want to know. So I am going to keep pursuing this until I figure out a way to be successful. So long answer, but being relentless. And I think you'll find that across everything in life.
For sure, for sure. So, what would you say is driving you today? Because like you said, you're not really looking for cash flow plays. You're looking for more long term investments and long term wealth. So, what would you say is still driving you to want to acquire new assets or buy your first commercial building or still be involved with new developments?
Yeah, there's several things. So number one, living up to your potential is number one. What can I do? I want to help my siblings. My parents don't have a whole lot of money. My little sister's disabled. I want to make sure she's taken care of, and eventually have a family myself. So those are the two major things. But then on top of that, too, a little more selfish reason, I also just I love snowboarding, climbing, hiking, mountain biking, that sort of thing. I live in Colorado, so I want to get to the point where a little bit later in my 20s, I can just travel around the world snowboarding and climbing mountains and that sort of thing. So that's not cheap. Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. And I really think that's a great response to that, just living up to your potential. I think that's dope. Like just trying to see how big you can really take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because, I don't really, I'm not particularly materialistic. I've been driving the same car since I was a teenager. I wear cheap clothes and I don't think they'll ever change. I could win the lottery tomorrow, but there's a lot of good things that I could do with money as it gets to the point where it's far more than myself or my family would ever need. There's a lot of other Downs kids besides my sister, so there's a million places that money can go to help other people down the road too.
For sure, for sure. So how would you like for people to remember you and your companies?
That's a good question. I was thinking about that. I think, I really enjoy developing people, especially people that come from not ideal backgrounds. I can sympathize with that. So I want to create a business. I think it was what's his name, the long-haired, not Buffett. Who's the rich guy with long? Richard Branson. He was the one who. And I'm going to butcher the quote, but the concept is, teach them to be good enough that they could go do it themselves, but treat them well enough that they stay in the company. I want to make this a business about developing people, or developing the people that are employed by me, and bettering their lives too. I think that just how much I've enjoyed working with the new acquisitions manager and helping her. I think that is what I would want it to be remembered for.
No, that's awesome. And how does it feel, like when you have employees and people working for you? Like was that a moment that made you feel like, man, I made it, I'm at a different level now, or how did you take that in?
It was more, I remember an overwhelm. It was the same feeling I got when I've taken private investors' money, an overwhelming feeling of responsibility. Hey,
Yeah.
you better make sure that she has the opportunity to make money, or with the investors, you better make damn sure that you do not lose their money. Just a really it made it more into a serious business because it's not just about me. There are people relying on me, right? So responsibility, a big feeling of responsibility.
Right. That's what I was about to say. With great power comes great responsibility, or whatever
Yeah,
Spider Man said.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. So, what does the future of front range land look like to you?
So I'm working on getting to the point. There's a certain income goal I want to hit, and then just getting to the point of buying and selling about 10 parcels a month is the goal, and getting more spec houses going. I'm working on that right now. Met with a couple investors last week. I don't think anything's going to suddenly solve the affordable housing crisis we have right now. There's just a lack of units. So it's really hard to go wrong building just a simple 3-bed, 2-bath ranch, 1,500 square foot. So I want to have uh, two of those. Well, one coming to fruition a month. Let's put it that way.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Dan, thank you so much for your time, man. I've definitely learned a lot, and I definitely want to stay in touch with you in the
Sure.
future. But before we get out of here, at the end of every podcast, we like to play a rapid fire question game where I ask you 3 questions. So if you're willing to answer and play, I'll go ahead and ask.
Sure.
All right. Question number one: where's your favorite place to travel?
Any snowboarding resort in the Rocky Mountains in the middle of winter. And I'm 2 or 3 miles in the sky flying down a mountain. It's my favorite place in the world.
For sure. Question number two: what song explains your life the most?
Oh, man. I think Hypnotized by Biggie because that's one of my favorite songs ever. But maybe I should say I Wish by CeeLo or Skilo because I'm short.
All right, all right. A little final question, brother. What's an amazing thing that you did that no one was around to see?
Um, Gosh, it feels a little self-indulgent, but I guess if I have to answer that, when I was a teenager, I competed in bodybuilding. So I used to look very different. I was over 200 pounds at 5'7", very lean, squatting, deadlifting, 600 pounds. And I'll tell you, man, the work and discipline that goes into that, it makes everything else look easy. That was the hardest thing I've ever done by far. I am not lean naturally. That was a challenge. Yeah.
So did you have to like alter everything you ate and eat certain specific things?
Oh yeah, yeah. You're talking half a year of chicken and rice and hour of cardio a day plus weightlifting and oh man, yeah. Yeah, that
I
was
remember
difficult.
I used to watch MTV True Life or something like that with the bodybuilders and they'll walk
Yeah,
around with gallons of water and
yeah.
chicken and lettuce. I'm like, man, that looks miserable.
Yeah, dude, I missed my high school graduation because I was at my first bodybuilding show.
That's crazy, bro. That's real
Yeah,
dedication though.
yeah. I didn't have time for that. So yeah.
Hey, for sure. Dan, thank you so much for your time today, man. I learned a lot.
Likewise, thanks, Wes. This was fun.